Welcome to the Decentralized Podcast, where we break down the world of Web3, digital assets, and DAOs with me, your host, Pietri Basson.
Alex Poon, co-founder for Charmverse. Welcome to the Decentralized Podcast. Really looking forward to this.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we normally kick off these conversations somewhere a little bit different. I want to kick this one off with helping your high school son with engineering problems using AI. I saw you posted about that a little while ago.
Sorry, what's the question again?
So helping your high school son with engineering problems using AI.
Yeah. I was just fascinated. It has been a while since I've done slightly advanced high school math. And I think that we were trying to solve a physics problem, and I just didn't remember how to calculate or how to think about force and the units related to it. And we were just trying to go through this sample problem, and we just couldn't get to the right answer. And then I ended up just having talk to ChatGPT and say, like, how do you do this particular problem? And then of course it has to do with gravity, right? And we just didn't take into account the fact that the problem was talking about gravity. But simply asking the question, ChatGPT was actually not ChatGPT. We're using the perplexity. So being able to outline sort of step by step how it was, or how you should be thinking through the problem, and what are the various input. I found it I was blown away compared to. I'm blown away by many AI applications too, but this particular one, just the explainability of it, right? Just being able to help us understand, not even just to solve the problem, but how to solve the problem and the steps involved. So that was very cool.
Okay. No, I thought that would be a cool place to kick off, because I know, this is your third startup. Yeah. Your previous two startups were all both AI related.
Yes.
You were sort of been working in that space. So maybe before we get into the crypto stuff, XAI, AI Care, you've been working in that space for a while.
Visual revenue was the first one.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So what has been sort of the main drivers in AI, and what do you see happening in AI going forward, and potentially AI working with the crypto space as well?
Yeah. So I always tell people that a big part of AI is having a set of well-labeled data that is large enough to train the AI. And in the perfect world, it's as large as possible. One good example that I like to give is you have Google, that on one side is very good at serving ads to you using AI, and have been doing that for many, many years successfully. But the same company with the same brilliant minds trying to develop a self-driving car, we still don't have self-driving cars yet, right? But there's still a lot of human driving cars driving around Palo Alto and other places collecting data. That's really the difficulty, that there are a few use cases right now that we're naturally generating well-labeled data. Images of human faces, or in some cases objects, and languages, code. Those we have a much better large body of well-labeled data, or human-labeled data based on usage. And there's a lot of use cases that we as a community wants to apply AI for, but don't have those well-labeled data. So I think that's the challenge of how to think about finding and generating well-labeled data at scale.
Okay. No, I think, that's, especially with training an AI model, what it's trained on is so important.
Yeah.
And I think, we've seen some weird results with some of the data that things have been trained on.
Yeah.
This almost gets into Charmverse and getting into it, but I know in one of the interviews previously, you mentioned sort of building a team, one of these projects that you worked up to 60 people, and sort of the challenges that you faced there in terms of getting everyone to work together, in lighting incentives, etc. So I work with a lot of startups. I see founders struggling with this all the time.
Yeah.
You've sort of successfully built two very large teams. What would you say were the biggest challenges and the things that you had to solve for as you were scaling?
Yeah. So thinking about humans is such a messy problem, which I love, and coordination problems. And I see actually two spectrums. One is that some founders in the early time, they look at, again, Google or whatever company they aspire to, like they're doing so great in terms of the product and financial, etc. Maybe we should just use their processes. And that doesn't work, because when you are 5 people sitting together, you actually don't need a lot of processes, maybe none, right? Like you are already in sync and you are doing the work, and adding all these extra stuff, it just slows you down, right? With that said, as you grow the team, and I think the rule of thumb is sort of every time you double the size of the team, there's a bunch of things that will break when it comes to like how communication, coordination, how to manage people, if there's management required, or do you even need to manage people at all? And people a lot of times just adding, here's another team member, and continue to use the same playbook that you were using when you were 5 people, and now that you're 10, or now that you're 15, now you're 20. And particularly in crypto, that a lot of teams are distributed, and it makes it even so much more difficult to even observe the challenges, or observe the changes that are happening, right? That when you're all sitting in the same room, like when someone's checked out, it's a lot easier to just sort of notice it. But when you are in a different time zone, just away from a computer, it's much harder to kind of understand and diagnose these human issues.
Okay. And I mean, did you previously worked with remote teams a lot? So what are some of the challenges you've seen with remote teams and getting everyone on the same page, getting everyone to work together, making sure all the deliverables are done?
So for Charmverse, in a way, is a learning for us too, because for the first 2 companies, we have always centralized in a location, right? But I think a big part of that is a lot of managers and leaders have only managed with this type of mechanism, that they sort of manage by walking around, right? Just talking to people casually, having information flow from one way or another. And that shortcuts a lot of things, which in a way is good, because it makes things more fast-paced. In a remote perspective, you have to be a lot more explicit in writing things down, in how things ought to get done, and setting standards, and just get really used to outlining the plans and for everybody, and for that. How should you communicate as a developer on what you're building? How should you communicate as a marketer and community person on like what are you doing? How you plan to do that? Like what are the measurements and what are the metrics? Because again, if you're not explicit, you don't have the fallback of, we just happened to talk about it over lunch or over drinks, and even though we missed or forgot to outline the KPI, we just talk through it. When you didn't write it down in a remote team, you probably just end up not having it.
Yep. And I think it's sort of building those interactions. That's the traditional Apple design for their offices. There's design, so you have those random interactions.
Right.
And how do you intentionally build that into a remote team? So you still have those interactions, still have well-aligned incentives. Everyone understands what's going on.
Yeah. Although like when the team get larger, like for X.AI, when we were 60 people, we were on 2.5 floors in the same building. So people are not walking up and down the floor every day, or people in different rooms. So everybody was living on Slack. So in a way, they're sort of remote.
Yes.
But you still get the random interactions of people having lunch together, people go get drinks afterwards. So you still get a lot of that. But that's where when growth started to happen, of that, like the communication breakdown, even if you are in the same building, because people just don't naturally talk to each other across all 60 people. Well, if you do, then all you're doing is talking. No one's doing any work.
Okay. Well, I mean, I want to get into Charmverse and how that's almost the future of organizations, if I can put it that way. But before we get into that, how did you get introduced to the crypto space for the first time and actually decide to set up a company that works in this space?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I was running the other companies and kept an eye on crypto, I mean, just from news and all the tech blogs, I think the most explicit like events that I remember, I think I was listening to one of the A16Z podcasts, and Chris Dixon was talking about how excited he was about Ethereum and is about to launch a mainnet and so on. And actually, I always regret the time that maybe that was the time that I should have jumped into crypto. But I think I think the most exciting part for me was the idea that going from just an asset that you can trade, which I was a lot less interested in, but the idea of being able to build or rebuild this worldwide computer, and then rethink about how coordination happens and how systems are built.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, very interesting. And then how did you decide on sort of Charmverse specifically that that's the problem that you're going to solve? And maybe for those people who don't know what Charmverse is, can you maybe give your explanation of what you guys do?
Yeah, so Charmverse is about connecting builders and opportunities, and particularly foundations, and in a lot of cases grants. But we started off more software for DAOs, particularly in a way to frame it as kind of Web3 notion. Mm-hmm. So giving you that interface of a combination of coordination feature as well as crypto features, and unlocking new use cases by combining those. As the world evolved, it turned out that when you combine those two use cases, it works really well with foundation, and particularly like Grants Foundation, in thinking about the workflow on going from the intake of application to evaluating the applications and the various projects, and then managing the milestones, and then the payments, and then the identity and credentials. It's kind of creating this full loop of how to think about crypto community that is driven by grants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's for me is what's really interesting is I almost look at DAOs as the next evolution of how people work together.
Yeah.
So we had companies, but they're not very transparent.
Yeah.
You've got a shareholder meeting, there's not too much direct feedback. Shareholders vote once a year on what's going on.
Yeah.
But there's no transparency internally either. And then we came up with DAOs, and especially in the beginning, everything should be a vote, etc. But there's no real software. There's no way to facilitate it.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of teams struggling with that. And I think that's where Charmverse is so exciting. This is now that really operational software to start building these things that are completely transparent, all the benefits of blockchain.
Yeah.
But this is the new way that people will work together in the future.
Yeah. So even at X.AI, we spend a lot of, because again, being a coordination nerd, spend a lot of time trying out different experiments within a traditional Web 2 startup context. We let the whole team vote on, or we try letting the whole team vote on what feature we ship the next quarter. And kind of actually coming from that experience, and I could have told you already that the first generation of DAOs wouldn't quite work for all the same reasons. Just that there's some great decision that will be good to push to the larger body of people, but then there's also decision that you really need a small group of people that are well knowledge, that are dedicated to that particular problem, and solving that problem. And it's much more about allocating resources to that group, time, capital, rather than having every single action be voted on. Mm-hmm. That turned out not to be a very efficient way to do work on a day-to-day basis.
No, I've seen that very realistically. I think, especially in the beginning, a lot of people are very egalitarian. Everything is a vote. We're all going to work together on everything. But $1,000 spent can't be a vote.
Right.
But to your point as well, I mean, I worked with one entity where was a lending protocol, and there was a community proposal coming through the ranks where the community said, okay, let's decrease collateral and increase sort of returns. But that fundamentally breaks the protocol. So, I mean, there are some things that the community shouldn't be deciding on.
Right.
There should be a core group of people who really understand the risk,
right,
who can actually manage it and get into it.
Yeah, but I think like there is that transparency of like, how do we select that core group of people, and how do we hold that core group of people accountable, and having a mechanism to swap them out, and aligning the incentives so that they will, when they are voted into that position, that they will sort of do the task with the alignment of what the collective wants to do.
Well, I mean, let's maybe get into that. So let's say someone is using Charmverse. They've set up a steering committee who's running a specific function. I know you can run certain governance functions through Charmverse. You can also have that almost like a Notion page showing meetings, notes, etc. So if someone wanted to implement a steering committee doing something like that, how would they use Charmverse and how would that work?
Yeah, so some of that is certainly the tool, and then part of it is also the processes. So the tool doesn't negate the fact that you need to have a well thought out process on how, what decisions should be made by whom, right? So coming up with that process first on what type of decision do we have to make, and then who will make them, and then configuring Charmverse to facilitate that decision making. So particularly one unique capability that Charmverse brings to the table is this very flexible workflow, so that you can configure, particularly in a grant setting, but also you can configure in using for governance as well, is what are the steps and what are the type of decision in that particular step. That step could be a single person just checking off to see if this is a spam application or not, or to see if this proposal actually aligns with what the collective is interested in even thinking about, right? And then there is could be a step about a decision rubrics that you are going through, checking in to see if this application is fulfilling this particular area. Like, is this the right team? Can they deliver? And so on and so forth. And then there's a step about voting that we are fully connected to Snapshot. So if you want to conduct more of a traditional Web3 votes, you can also do that with Charmverse as well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we implemented Charmverse on one of my projects, and one of the things that was interesting is you can also have access control in terms of who can view what with these things. So if there are certain things that should be private and internal to that council or that group, and some things that are, public and the community can see everything, and there is that transparency. So almost going back to what we said earlier, you can have the best of both worlds now and get the benefits.
Yeah, and that's the part that gets really exciting in combining the crypto elements to productivity elements, is that like access control is not new, but being able to use digital asset to control access, that's new, right? So, I mean, the most basic form, if you hold an NFT, grants you that role allows you to add comments or create proposal, etc. Or you can be more advanced. We're integrating the HATS protocol. We were talking about HATS before. And so, if you start to map your organization with HATS, then depending on who held which hat will grant you the right permissions. And now you can have this much more decentralized ways of mapping the organization, but then also having a full access control built out in Charmverse.
And I think the other one that was really interesting, I mean, you talk about hats and you can have people with specific hats, but what you guys have also built is credentials for specific people. So you can have credentials, show what you've done, etc. And I mean, with GetGwen Passport, I know you guys integrate with them, etc. You previously spoke about this in terms of you're moving from one company to another company. You almost start brand new. But this is a very new way of thinking about that, having your credentials. So how do you think about running that, and what are the benefits of having this and everything being transparent?
So I think the one area that even before Charmverse had always excited me about is sort of, what does this future of work look like? And your work history is actually stuck for most Web2 people, right? Actually, most of the world, it's stuck in some HR database, right? And when we hire people, and that's including crypto, that people still go through the traditional interview process. And you speak to basically most HR professionals or managers, they'll tell you that it sucks. And it's not, I mean, of course, there's better ways to like do interviews and so on. But the biggest problem is that it's much more, there's a lot more information for that you can gather when you actually work with that person, right? And a lot of the information do come through in things like your 360 reviews, or when at the end of the projects, when we actually have some retro on talking about like what went well, what didn't go well, or even just the metrics of the project themselves. But all that information is stuck in some productivity tools or some HR database in your Web2 company. I think there's a lot of opportunity to bring that onto the blockchain, and then enable you to, yes, when you move from one company to another company, but also just from when you're working on multiple projects, right? So then you don't have to re-establish your reputation every single time. And I think we are just the right time now with being able to issue decentralized credentials in a much more truly scalable way, and then issuing things on the blockchain in a price that is not cheap enough only to power really expensive NFTs, but be able to only spend a fraction of a cent to create credentials that you can verify, right? So we're integrated into hats, we're integrated into EAS and ceramic, so then you have options of what type of credential you want to issue within Charmverse. And then so you start to really kind of fulfill this circle of when you are participating in a grant, and the fact that you won the grant, the fact that you accomplished milestones, the fact that you abandoned the grant that you won and you actually never delivered the projects. Those things are, people want to know that, right? And people want to be able to rely on that reputation. So you have that potentially best of both worlds. Is for some want to stay being an add-on, but it's not even that per se. Even though if you adopt it, you still want to be able to like be able to show off like these are my accomplishments, and you can verify those. You know who issued them, and then being able to tell that like this when I come and apply for another grant, that these are my true experience in the space.
No, and I think that's where the technology is so exciting, because someone can have those credentials and you don't have to call up a reference or just trust them because they said they've done something.
Right.
And we also know, I mean, they can't fake those credentials if it's coming. It's, you're using the blockchain, you know that this actually happened.
Right.
So we talk about trustless, but this is with trust almost being built into a trustless system, because yes, someone can be completely anon, but they can build a reputation on chain for the things that they've done. So
yeah, I mean, so I think for DeFi, it makes a lot of sense to have a fully trustless system, right? But human coordination there is trust. Like you are working with someone. You want to be able to trust them. You want to build a relationship. Humans, not code. But credentials could be that piece of that. That is something that help you build that trust. By having a system that's transparent, a system that's permissionless, that you can actually check that and not fully just trust on the words of the person that come through.
No, and that's where I think we see it so often is the technology can solve it. That's fine, but the human aspect is where it breaks down.
Right.
I've spoken about even tokenization of assets. Tokenizing assets is easy, but if you want that secondary liquidity, everyone has to agree on that marketplace where we'll all trust that marketplace and work. So it's a human problem more than anything else.
Right.
I think the one other thing that you guys have built in is rewards and incentives. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you've built that in and what the potential is there?
So for a lot of grants program, we'll use the reward system as the milestone tracking system, because again, most of the more advanced grant program now all use milestones-based tracking, because at the end of the day, you don't want to just give someone a bag of tokens and say like, thank you for applying, right? You want to be able to hold people accountable. You want to hold project accountable, and then be able to actually deliver results and be able to track them. and then in return, being able to compensate and provide that incentive for it. That's sort of one big use case that we see a lot. But you can also use the same reward system to do sort of the small bounties, but also just onboarding tasks, but in return, creating credentials on the other side of that. So then now you have sort of proof of your knowledge, or proof of education, or proof of kind of onboarding on the path to being a larger part of the collective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I think we've danced around grants a lot. I think you guys work with grants a lot. Maybe to start out with, what's the biggest challenges that you're seeing with different grants projects?
Right.
And then we can get into sort of detail of implementations.
Yeah. So I think grants in general for the past year or so have been a huge topic, and we're very excited to be supporting multiple programs. I mean, there's in a way just so many challenges because when there is money involved, it's always a little bit messy, right? So, of course, as a start, there's a lot of scam out there, and there's a lot of people just trying to get free money, and being able, how do you stop so that group of people coming through, or simply being able to effectively doing so, right? Because I mean, it's a cat and mouse game, so it takes a lot of resources on the side of the foundation and the tool to even just get started, right? Like when you get thousands of applications, when you have a grants program coming through, like how do you go through them if you get a person, again, a real human reading a 2-page application? If there are thousands of them, that's a lot of hours, right? And there's limited capacity on the grant council side to actually do that work, and that's just initial intake, right? So that's one challenge. And second is, how do you? I mean, at the end of the day, grants is about community building, and how do you build trust? How do you show fairness? How do you help the community understand like what the foundation or the collective is trying to do? And why is the grants program the right tool to do that? So a lot of that comes down to being very thoughtful about the process, but also how to execute against them. For example, a lot of program is structured in a way that is a small grants council that are making a lot of decisions. Now, a lot of grant councils are voted in. So I think like that's where the decentralized decision making come through, but then they have a lot of latitude about like how to execute on their like day-to-day reviewing of the grants. But the grants council can choose to be more and more transparent or more and more explicit, right? So showing exactly what the decision rubrics are going to be, and how are those rubrics are going to be rated against each other, and how does that align to what the collective is trying to do, what is the mission and vision of the DAO, and that's why the decision being made that way. And then if you show then at the end of that the project that are selected that map through to sort of this mission and vision and metrics that you're evaluating, it builds that trust that even though you're the project that didn't get the funding or didn't get selected, I think people will be a lot less upset when they have a sense of like, okay, I might even disagree with the decision making, but at least I can appreciate the thoughtfulness around like what went through, and then like how the team had executed against that.
Yeah, no, and it's good to see tooling for this, because especially on the Lemma side, we've seen it. Especially you'll have, let's say, grants council, they have meetings, and initially we would do minutes for those meetings, and you'd publish those minutes almost.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's always tricky, and there's some confidential information. But if you have a Charmverse flow, did you meet these criteria? Okay, no, yes. Okay, you can already see why not. You can make that very transparent. You can maybe add a comment for why something was rejected.
Yeah.
And then in a grants meeting, you only discuss the main things.
Yeah.
You can, cut down on time, or only the issues that were identified.
Yeah.
Because yes, that's a lot of work, and especially with big projects.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more grant council to even opening up the internal reviews or the comments about the application to the grantees or the potential grantees as well. Because actually one of the biggest asks from grantees is that if their project didn't get selected, they want to know why, right? And a lot of times there is a very legit reason. Again, you may not like it, you may not agree with it, but there is a real reason. And when you don't provide those legit reason, then rumor starts.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Like maybe you only like to give people money to your friends. And I would say like all the customers they work with, that is not the case.
No, definitely not. Yeah. No, and we want that transparency. So, I mean, you sort of mentioned the applicants, people that are applying for grants. I know you were supposed to give a talk that you couldn't do on writing the Taylor Swift of grant applications. So, I mean, very cool title, number one. So, what is required to almost write the Taylor Swift of grant applications for the folks out there that are looking at that?
Yeah, so top of my mind, there are a few things. Because how transparent a lot of the grant councils are, it would be silly to, as a grantee or as an applicant, to not take advantage of understanding a lot of these things. Understanding the selection criteria. They're like, if this particular grant is a DeFi grant, well, then don't apply if you are a community-centric or education-centric project, right? Then you're just wasting your own time, right? And a lot of teams I've also seen is they never really study the decision rubrics, even though everything is published, right? So then you can see like how is the grants council making decision against all the different areas, or in the application they don't make the attempt to address the individual points, even knowing that like that's how the grants council is making decision against that criteria. Right? Or you know that they're looking for certain metrics and you don't show that, or you don't have a strong showing in that particular metrics. And then being surprised that you didn't get selected.
Yeah. No, right. Quality of submission is definitely something we've seen a lot as well.
Right.
When people, for example, these are the 4 things we need,
right,
and you might address 2 of them and ignore everything else.
Yep.
So having a tool that almost forces you to fill in certain fields is very useful, because people, just leave things out. But then it also is maybe an easy way to, say, you didn't explain this, please update. And
yeah. And again, we have been on the grantee side as an advocate as well. So like we've been there, and certainly some of those challenges, again, it's both sides. And then I'll add one more is sort of budgeting. That again, I know there's a lot of, maybe in some of the earlier vintage of grants, is that it seems like people just ask for a lot of money and then they got it, and then they maybe feel like maybe I should ask for a lot of capital too. But I think, again, now more advanced grants council are a lot more savvy about what is the budget and what are you going to accomplish based on that budget within the milestone. So being able to articulate that is increasingly becoming more important, because you really need to be able to say, well, why would you need X amount of token? When I've seen, particularly for grants council who review hundreds, if not thousands of applications, that someone oftentimes will say like, but I've seen something very similar that is costing like 1/10 of what you're asking for. So if you come up with something that's 10x more expensive or require 10x more resources, you need to be able to justify that. Or again, your project might not be selected.
Yeah. No, I think with submissions we've reviewed, that's one of the biggest challenges, is setting milestones. And a lot of projects struggle with doing that almost.
Yeah.
They're like, we'll build this thing. And we're like, yes, but
why?
And what's the process to get there? Like, you need to say, okay, this is the first step that we'll do. Okay, this is the amount of tokens. It's not like those older sort of vintages, as you said.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tokens. Let's hope that you build this. I think we're now realizing, let's set up milestones, make it easier to track.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the other things that you guys built is Grant Tracker. So you can maybe just give an overview for people. I think that's a really interesting thing that's out there.
Yeah, and you'll see us do a lot more in this area too. I mean, as we support more and more grants program on Charmverse, it's supporting in the operation side of kind of this end-to-end process. what we have learned is that another challenge, or maybe even a bigger challenge, is a lot of foundations want to bring in high quality builders and community members into their ecosystem, but having a difficult time finding them. Partially because a lot of information is stored in the governance forum, and then a piece of it is on Twitter, as another piece is in a Airtable database somewhere, and it's very difficult for applicants to keep track of all the different ecosystem and trying to follow what are the deadlines and what are the criteria, and then what are the is this grant right for me, which in our case I think is just overwhelming. So we built a grant tracker, which is really a destination to help collect all the different grants that are kind of currently in play, and just give you the highlights of the timing, the requirements, and so on, so that for potential grantees looking to apply for a grant, they have one place to go and hopefully pretty quickly get a sense of these are the 3 or 5 grants for this month that I should pay attention to, and then hopefully increase the success rate of someone actually getting a grant.
No, I think it's very valuable for grants teams as well, because you want high quality contributors,
right?
And getting their attention is really hard.
Yeah.
But if there's one place where those high quality contributors can see, okay, these are the things this suits my skill set, okay, I'll apply for it. That's a valuable sort of add-on for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of the projects grants that are building at the moment. So I know Optimism, Arbitrum, Polygon, Mantle, they're all using the system.
Yep.
What have you seen with some of their implementations, or what are some lessons that you've learned from working with? I mean, those are all very big projects.
Yeah, and they're all great teams, but they have very different vibes or style, right? And I think a big difference is actually in the way how transparent they make the process, and it makes sense for their particular community too, right? But yeah, there's a big range of how much information would you find out about projects. So just as an example, Optimism is one of the most transparent grants program out there, and you get to see all the applications that are out there. So in a way, as a project, sometimes you might feel a little bit uncomfortable. They're like, what if my competitor, and you're publishing all this information about your project for the grants, and it's all public information, right? So what if my competitor actually see that information and use it against me? It's a real concern, but that's certainly the trade-off for transparency and trust building. And then you have projects that are on a different spectrum where you don't know what projects are being selected or in different stages, and that again have different trade-offs. So I think personally, I'm more of a transparency, not maxi, but definitely I like to optimize for transparency and trust building when possible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, is building for the right fit in terms of what you're doing, but also focusing. Because I've spoken to teams where they're frustrated because they're building on one specific thing the community's asked for, but then there's a new shiny object and this gets selected. So sometimes you almost need to do some things internally because there might be things that you're working on that's not public yet.
Yeah.
So you're trying to incentivize and give grants for specific things for specific reasons.
Right.
And in other cases, there is a very good reasons for transparency. So building for the right size, right fit is definitely a challenge. I think everyone's still working through it.
Yeah. No, exactly. There are definitely those instances where maybe the core team is actually building a similar capability, right? So that's why a project will probably not get funded, but it's difficult to tell the project at that particular moment in time that the core team is going to launch this 6 weeks from now, right? And that's this unfortunate instance.
Yeah, definitely. So, we're at ETH CC at the moment. I know you've been here we're in Brussels. It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
What's been your experience? What do you say has been some of the trends that you've seen for ETH CC this year?
Yeah, it has been super productive. I think the vibe is great. I think there's just a lot of energy in various builders I've been talking to. So I think like just overall, just continuing the momentum of building. And yeah, so I'm just actually having a lot of great conversation and have this like just renew excitement around like what's going to come out in the next for the remainder of the year, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, I mean, we always wrap up with sort of what's exciting you at the moment. So from these conversations, what's exciting for you in the space right now?
Yeah. So I think we've done a lot of work in identity and credentials, and I'm particularly excited that the advancement in this area, that I think that a lot of the right pieces are all falling into place in terms of like technology maturity, in terms of cost, in terms of like people's focus on this area. So identity and reputation is what I'm most excited about.
Okay, interesting. And then, not to only focus on the positive, what is concerning you in the space at the moment?
I think still such massive focus on price action. Like just meme coins. I mean, I think there's actually a special place for meme coins, and I think speculation is a differentiated capability in crypto. So I think actually that it's important to incorporate that into different products. With that said, I think that if meme coin is the only thing that we got, that's the challenge.
No, definitely. Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you very much for the time. If people want to find out more about you, about Charmverse, where's the best place to find you?
I'm on Podcaster. I'm on Twitter, so you can definitely find me in those places. It's all Alex Poon, either under alexpoon.eth or alexpoon_HK for Hong Kong.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Decentralized Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would really appreciate it if you could like and share this. If you got any value from it or find anything interesting, please just also follow us on YouTube or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. If you want to connect with me, you can just follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. The links are down in the description. And I'd also like to thank our partner for this episode, Lemma. Lemma sits DAOs and foundation governance companies to do their governance, operations, and all the admin tasks. If you really want to focus on building your community and building the project that you're working on, Lemma can take care of all the admin, all the really boring stuff, so you can focus on the important stuff. You can find a link to their page down in the description as well. I'll see you on the next episode.